My name is Isabel, and I live in Portland, Oregon. It was late October, the kind of evening when the air smelled like cinnamon and wet leaves, and the streets were littered with gold and red. I was helping my 8-year-old son, Noah, tape together his old Iron Man costume, the same one he'd worn last year, a little tighter now around the shoulders, but he didn't seem to mind. He was just excited for Halloween night, for the candy, the laughter, the thrill of walking under orange porch lights. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. This year, just your sister's kids for trick or treat. Keeping it simple. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the weight of every October that had felt like this one, where simple always meant without me. Noah looked up, his eyes wide and innocent. "Mom, what does Grandma mean?" he asked. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. We'll think of something else." My fingers typed a single word back: enjoy. They had no idea that I owned a $6 million hilltop castle in Yamhill County, nor that this year, I would turn Halloween into a night for everyone who'd ever been left out. Tell me, have you ever watched your child be treated the same cruel way you once were? When Noah went to bed that night, I lingered in the quiet living room, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. Outside, Portland's autumn drizzle misted against the windows, soft and rhythmic, like a heartbeat I had known my whole life. The glow from the street lamps shimmered through the rain, casting reflections of gold and amber leaves against the glass. I sat there, staring out, my phone still beside me, the message from Mom open, like a wound that refused to close. This year, just your sister's kids for trick or treat, keeping it simple. Those words had cut deeper than they should have. Maybe because they were never just about Halloween. They were about years of being told in 100 small, polite ways that I was unnecessary. That I was the extra chair at the table, the afterthought in the family photo, the quiet one they could skip without the world falling apart. The longer I sat there, the more the past began to unravel, like a film reel starting to flicker. I was 10 again, my fingers numb from the Oregon cold, holding a paper bag that was already starting to tear at the corners. That year, I had begged Mom to let me wear something new, something fun, maybe the vampire cape from the store near Burnside, or even the fairy wings that glowed in the dark. She looked up from curling Chloe's hair and said, "We don't need to waste money on 2 costumes, Isabel. You can wear last year's witch dress. It still fits." The witch dress. I can still feel the scratchy fabric against my skin, the faint smell of mothballs. The black was faded to gray, and the pointy hat drooped to one side like it had given up halfway through trying to stand tall. Meanwhile, Chloe, my little sister, 4 years younger, stood on a stool in the kitchen, arms lifted as Mom adjusted her brand new dress. It shimmered with sequins, the color of spun sugar. "Hold still, sweetheart," Mom said, pinning the tiny tiara into Chloe's blonde curls. "You're going to be the prettiest princess at the church tonight. Day code is Phi." I remember the envy, but more than that, the quiet ache of invisibility. Not because I wanted to be a princess, I didn't. I just wanted to be seen. To have Mom look at me the way she looked at Chloe, proud, radiant, like her child, was the center of the world. When we went trick-or-treating that night, the air smelled of wet pavement and caramel. Kids ran ahead of us, laughing, their costumes glowing under the streetlights. I tried to keep up, but the hem of my dress kept snagging on my shoes. Chloe's pumpkin-shaped candy bucket swung from her hand, already half full. Mine was just a plain brown paper bag from the grocery store, softening from the drizzle. We reached the last house on the street, when Mom glanced at her watch and frowned. "We need to go," she said sharply, tugging Chloe's arm. "We have to make it to the pastor's house before they start the Halloween gala." The gala? I asked, trying to catch my breath. "But we're still..." "Enough candy for tonight, Isabel," she interrupted. "You're old enough to understand that it's not all about treats." Old enough, that phrase had become her favorite excuse to deny me joy. Old enough to wear hand-me-downs, old enough to stay home while Chloe got new shoes. Old enough to clean up after dinner instead of sitting at the table with everyone else. I remember walking beside them in silence as we reached the church at the end of the street. The building glowed warm and golden from inside. Laughter spilled through the stained glass windows. Through the glass, I could see a long buffet table, overflowing with caramel apples, cupcakes shaped like ghosts, bowls of bright orange punch. People in costumes filled the hall, princesses, knights, superheroes. Chloe ran ahead, her tiara glittering under the lights as Mom rushed to greet one of the church ladies. I stood by the door, clutching my damp paper bag, watching them disappear inside. One of the ushers looked at me kindly. "Aren't you coming in, sweetheart?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm just waiting." So, I waited on the steps, in the cold. The porch light above me buzzed faintly, moths circling it like ghosts of summer. The paper bag tore open at the bottom, spilling a few sticky candies onto the concrete. I remember crouching down, trying to pick them up with numb fingers, but the caramel had already glued them to the paper. My breath fogged the air, and in the glass door, I could see my own reflection: the crooked hat, the cheap mask, the smudge of chocolate on my cheek. I looked like a stranger in my own story. Through the window, Mom lifted her phone, smiling as she took a photo of Chloe and the pastor's daughter posing together. I saw Chloe wave, her little gloved hand raised high. Mom waved back. But she never looked toward the door, where I stood, a blurred shape behind the reflection. I think that was the night something small and fragile cracked inside me. I didn't cry. I just took off the mask and held it in my hands. It was made of thin plastic, the kind that leaves red marks on your skin if you wear it too long. It smelled like dust and old makeup. And as I looked at it, I realized the cruelest thing wasn't the mask itself. It was that I had learned to wear another kind, an invisible one that smiled when it hurt, nodded when ignored, and laughed at jokes that were always at my expense. Every Halloween after that was a repeat. Chloe's dresses changed: Cinderella one year, Rapunzel the next, then a fairy with wings that blinked. Mine stayed the same. Sometimes I didn't even go out. I told Mom I had too much homework, or that I wasn't feeling well. But the truth was, I couldn't stand standing outside another window, watching someone else live the life I'd been told I didn't deserve. The only one who ever noticed was Grandma. She'd sometimes pull me aside when she visited for Thanksgiving, slipping a chocolate bar into my hand. "Don't lose that spark, Izzy," she'd whisper. "You have your mother's fire, but your father's patience. One day you'll build your own world." I didn't know what that meant back then. But I remembered it. Every word. Years later, when I was packing for college, Mom stood in the doorway and said, "Don't forget to leave the Halloween decorations for Chloe." She smiled like it was nothing, just another reminder that everything, even the small joys, belonged elsewhere. That night, sitting by the window with the rain whispering against the glass, I could still see that 10-year-old girl outside the church, her bag torn open, her mask in her hand. I wanted to reach through time and tell her she wasn't invisible, that the world would someday open its doors. But maybe she wouldn't have believed me then. Maybe she needed to stand in the cold to learn how to build warmth from within. By the time I turned 17, I had already learned how to disappear quietly. Not in a tragic way, just efficiently. I showed up, did what I had to do, smiled when expected, and then faded back into the wallpaper. It was easier that way. That fall, senior year, I received the letter that should have changed everything. A full scholarship to Stanford. I still remember the way my hands shook as I held the envelope, the bold red crest at the top of the page, the words, "We are pleased to inform you," my guidance counselor cried. My robotics teacher hugged me. Even my classmates clapped. For a brief moment, I felt seen, really seen. That night at dinner, I placed the letter on the table between Mom's casserole dish and Dad's folded newspaper. "I got in," I said softly. "Stanford offered me a full ride." Chloe looked up from her phone, frowning. "That's in California, right?" she asked, like it was a foreign country. Mom didn't look up right away. She poured herself more iced tea, then said, "Stanford's pretty far, isn't it? Your sister's been accepted at Oregon State. Much closer, more practical." "Practical?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Mom, it's Stanford. It's one of the best schools in the country." Dad turned the newspaper page, uninterested. We just don't want you too far away, Isabel. You'll get homesick. Homesick. The word stung, because I had never really felt at home. A week later, the school held its annual Halloween festival, a big event in our small town. Every senior class competed in costume contests, haunted house setups, and robotics displays. I had built a mechanical arm that could lift and throw candy, a silly idea at first, but it worked. My team dressed as robots, full aluminum suits made from recycled parts. We called ourselves the Automatrons. The gym buzzed with excitement, that night, disco lights flashing, pumpkins glowing along the bleachers. When they called my name for Best Robotics Costume, the applause echoed off the walls. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. For once, I didn't feel like the ghost in the room. I pulled out my phone and called Mom. She didn't answer. I texted her a photo of me holding the small gold trophy, my teammates cheering behind me. We won. Minutes passed. No reply. When the crowd started to leave, I checked social media. Chloe had just posted a photo from her high school. She was crowned Halloween Queen. She stood on a decorated stage, tiara glittering, holding a bouquet. Mom was there in the comments, writing, "So proud of our beautiful Chloe," followed by hearts and pumpkin emojis. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The laughter around me turned into background noise. My trophy suddenly felt heavy, useless, like a prop from a play where I didn't belong. I walked out into the hallway, the sound of footsteps and chatter fading behind me. The air was cooler there, still smelling faintly of paint and floor wax. I stood alone under the flickering fluorescent light, holding my trophy close to my chest. Down the hall, I could see through the glass doors parents picking up their kids, hugging them, congratulating them, snapping photos. I waited a few seconds longer, just in case. Maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe Mom would walk through that door, smiling, saying she got my text late. But the doors stayed closed. The janitor passed by, giving me a nod. "Congratulations, kid," he said. I smiled politely and thanked him, then walked outside. The night was cold, stars faint behind the Portland haze. I sat on the curb and looked at my reflection in the small gold plate of the trophy. It read, "Best Robotics Costume, Senior Class." That's when something shifted inside me, not the kind of rage that burns, but the kind that hardens into resolve. I realized that waiting for them to open the door was like waiting for spring in the middle of winter. You could freeze to death before it ever came. So, I made a silent promise to myself that night. If they would never open the door for me, I would build one of my own. And one day, I'd make sure it was wide enough for others like me to walk through too. When I got home, the house was dark except for the light under Chloe's bedroom door. I could hear Mom laughing softly with her inside, probably talking about the crown, the photos, the compliments. I paused at the end of the hallway, listening. Then I went to my room, placed the trophy on my desk, and whispered to the empty air, "They'll see me someday. Even if I have to light the whole damn sky." Years passed. Somewhere between the late-night study sessions, the cheap coffee, and the quiet bus rides to campus, I stopped waiting for their applause. I majored in logistics technology at Stanford, drawn to the beauty of systems that worked, supply chains that connected people, processes that made sense, equations that didn't lie. Unlike family dynamics, data didn't play favorites. Numbers didn't ignore you because someone else smiled prettier. After graduation, I stayed in California for a while, working at a shipping firm, learning how things moved, not just boxes, but people, needs, hope. I noticed how easily things broke down when chaos struck: hurricanes, wildfires, pandemics. No one really understood how fragile the world's order was until it stopped working. That's when the idea came, not from ambition, but from frustration. I wanted to build something that didn't depend on luck or privilege, a system that treated every request equally, no matter who asked. I called it RelayNet. It started in my small apartment in San Jose, with a laptop and a whiteboard covered in sticky notes. I coded during the nights, took consulting calls by day, and lived on instant noodles. By the end of the first year, 3 hospitals in Oregon had adopted my pilot software to manage emergency supply deliveries, masks, gloves, medications. Then came the wildfires. Overnight, roads closed, warehouses flooded, panic spread like smoke, and somehow, through all of it, RelayNet worked. We rerouted trucks, connected volunteers, tracked missing shipments, and rebuilt the map of movement in real time. By the time the pandemic hit, RelayNet had become the backbone of Oregon's emergency supply chain. Nurses used it to request ventilators. Fire departments used it to find routes around burned highways. I didn't sleep for weeks, neither did my team. We worked through every crash, every system overload. The local news did a segment one evening. The woman behind Oregon's emergency supply network. That was the first time I saw my name on television. Isabel Hart. Founder. Engineer. Problem solver. Mom called a few days later, the first time she'd reached out in nearly a year. "We saw you on TV," she said. "That's something. Chloe says she's proud of you." Her tone was polite, distant, as if she were congratulating a neighbor's daughter. I said thank you because there was nothing else to say. Then came the email that changed everything. A healthcare logistics conglomerate in Seattle offered to buy RelayNet for $120 million. I remember staring at the number for a long time, wondering what 10-year-old me standing outside that church window with her torn paper bag would have thought. I signed the deal a month later. With the money, I could have done anything. Moved to Silicon Valley, bought a penthouse in Seattle. But none of it called to me. What I wanted was silence. Space. Somewhere that looked like peace. One weekend, I drove out to Dundee Hills, an hour southwest of Portland, the heart of Oregon's wine country. The air smelled of grapes and rain. A local realtor took me up a narrow, winding road that climbed higher and higher until we reached the top of a hill. There it was, a forgotten stone castle, built by an eccentric winemaker in the 1920s. The salt walls weathered by time, ivy creeping up the turrets, arched windows that caught the last gold of the sun. The realtor said, most people found it too old-fashioned, too big, too lonely. I looked at it and saw something else. I saw a fortress not of isolation but of redemption. The ballroom was empty except for dust and echoes, but when I walked across the wooden floor, the sound of my footsteps filled the air like applause. The ceilings arched high, the windows opened toward endless vineyards, and the light pooled across the stone like spilled honey. It wasn't just beautiful, it was steady. I bought it the next day. It took nearly a year to restore new roof, new wiring, gardens replanted with lavender and autumn roses. When the work was done, I stood on the terrace with a cup of coffee, watching the valley below fade into fog. For the first time, I didn't feel like someone standing outside a closed door. I had built something solid, real, mine. People called it the Hilltop Castle. But to me, it was something else entirely. It wasn't a trophy for success or a monument to wealth. It was a quiet answer to every Halloween I'd ever spent alone on the doorstep. Every brick whispered, "You were never the problem. You just needed your own place to stand." Sometimes, at night, when the wind moved through the vines and the lights from the valley twinkled like scattered candy, I thought of that little girl again, the one with the torn bag, watching laughter through a window. I imagined her walking up the hill, seeing the lanterns glowing from my balcony, realizing that she no longer needed to knock. The door was already open, and that, I thought, was what freedom looked like. The first morning we moved into the castle, the fog still clung to the hills like a silk veil. From the terrace, the world looked painted, rows of vineyards dipped in bronze light, the Willamette Valley stretching endlessly below. The basalt walls of the estate glistened with dew, and somewhere in the distance, a hawk circled above the pines. It was quiet in a way that cities never are. No horns, no hum of traffic, just the sound of wind brushing against the stone towers and the faint whistle of leaves tumbling down the slope. The castle itself looked like something out of a storybook or maybe out of a dream someone once told a lonely child. The round towers were capped with dark slate roofs, their weathered tiles the color of storm clouds. Ivy crept along the sides, threading through the cracks of time. The entrance was framed by heavy oak doors, each iron hinge carved with vines and tiny constellations. When we first opened them, a gust of air rushed out cold, still, carrying the faint scent of cedar and dust. Inside, the ballroom took my breath away. The floors were polished oak, smooth underfoot, each plank reflecting the morning light that spilled through tall, arched windows. The ceiling stretched high above a stone vault carved with old family crests and grapevine motifs from the 1922. I'd replaced the old chandeliers with hundreds of pumpkin lanterns, strung across the beams with copper wire. When they glowed at night, it looked as if the stars had chosen to fall inside. Noah was the first to break the silence. He raced across the ballroom, his sneakers squeaking against the floor, his laughter echoing against the stone. "Mom!" he shouted, his voice bouncing from wall to wall. "This is a real castle, like the ones from books." I laughed. "That's because it is a real castle, my love." He ran to one of the windows, pressing his face against the glass to look out at the hills. "So, does that mean we're the kings and queens now?" I knelt beside him and brushed the hair from his forehead. "No," I said softly. "It means this is our home. The kind we build for ourselves when no one else gives us one." He nodded, serious for a moment in a way only 8-year-olds can be, then ran off again to explore the hallways. I followed slowly, touching the cool stone walls as I walked. Every corridor told a story: old wine racks built into the rock, an abandoned library lined with leather-bound books, a narrow staircase that spiraled up to a turret overlooking the valley. In the kitchen, the old cast-iron stove had been polished to shine, and the smell of cinnamon rolls from that morning still lingered. When the sun reached its highest point, I stood on the balcony outside the master hall. From there, I could see everything: the patchwork vineyards below, the river cutting through the valley like a silver thread, the small town of Dundee in the distance. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the air rush through me like a prayer. Owning this castle wasn't about luxury, it wasn't about the money or the success. It was about reclaiming space. About standing on ground that was mine, not borrowed, not begged for, not earned through their conditional love. For years, I had stood outside their doors, hoping to be let in. Now, I had built a door no one could close on me again. That evening, as the sun set behind the ridges, Noah helped me light the first row of pumpkin lanterns. We hung them along the balcony railing, their orange glow flickering in the cool wind. The valley below turned purple, the vineyards fading into silhouettes. "They look like fireflies," Noah said, staring at the lights. "Maybe they are," I whispered. Little pieces of our past finally lighting the way home. He didn't quite understand, but he smiled anyway, the kind of smile that makes time stop. After Noah went to bed, I stayed up, walking through the ballroom with a glass of wine in my hand. The echo of my footsteps followed me, the same sound that had once made me feel lonely, now strangely comforting. The lanterns swayed overhead, their shadows dancing on the walls. I thought about Mom, about Chloe, about the years of being told you're old enough to understand, and how none of them ever understood me. I hadn't told them about the castle. I hadn't told anyone, really, not even Rachel or Grandma yet. There was a kind of power in silence. A secret you nurture until it blooms. I wanted this place to grow quietly, untouched by their judgments or expectations. Because I knew, deep down, that one day they would find out. And when they did, it wouldn't be through me telling them, it would be through seeing it, like standing before a truth too grand to deny. I looked around the ballroom once more. The chairs were stacked neatly against the wall, the tables empty, waiting. In that emptiness, I saw potential: a stage, a gathering, a place where people who had once been left out could finally belong. Maybe it was the echo of my 10-year-old self whispering again, the girl outside the church window, asking to be let in. "I hear you," I said softly into the air. "But we don't have to wait anymore." The words lingered, caught between the beams and the light. Someday, I promised, this hall would be filled with laughter. Not the forced kind that hides cruelty behind good manners, but real laughter, the kind that warms the walls. Someday, every lantern here would shine for someone who once stood outside in the dark. I didn't know when or how, but I knew it would happen. For now, The castle was quiet, not lonely, just still. Like a stage before the orchestra arrives, like a table waiting to be set. And as the last candle flickered out, I thought, this place isn't just a home, it's the beginning of my answer to every door that was ever closed to me. A week before Halloween, the morning fog was so thick it rolled through the hills like smoke. I was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Mom. Short. Cold. This year, just your sister's kids for trick or treat, keeping it simple. For a moment, I just stared at it. I didn't even feel angry, not anymore. Just tired. It was the same pattern every holiday. Chloe's kids were the center of everything and Noah and I were the quiet afterthoughts. But when I looked up from the phone, I saw Noah sitting at the table, carefully cutting out paper bats for our front door decorations. His face was full of excitement, the kind that only children can have when October finally smells like cinnamon and sugar. Then he noticed my expression. "What's wrong, Mom?" he asked. I forced a smile and shook my head. "Nothing, honey." He put down his scissors. "Did Grandma text you?" The innocence in his voice cracked something open in me. "She said it's just Aunt Chloe's kids for trick or treat this year," I said gently. I waited for his face to fall, for the disappointment to sink in, and it did. His lips parted just slightly, like he was trying to understand why. "So, we can't go?" he asked. I walked over, knelt beside him, and pulled him into my arms. "No, sweetheart," I said softly, my hand stroking his hair. "We don't need to go anywhere." He leaned back, confused. "Then, what will we do?" I smiled, this time for real. "We'll give candy instead of asking for it." He blinked. "We'll give it?" "Yes," I said, standing up and pouring him a cup of warm milk. "We're going to do something different this year. Something no one's ever done before." I'm sided be peoples, and honor mended, imparted. I looked out through the kitchen window, the castle rising tall above the vineyards, the fog curling around its towers. The air outside was cool, alive, ready. And in that silence, an idea began to take shape. I didn't want revenge, not in the loud, destructive way. I wanted to rewrite the story. If they wanted to keep it simple, I'd do the opposite. I'd make it grand, open, full of light. A night where everyone who'd ever been left out could finally belong. That afternoon, I called Rachel, my cousin from Beaverton. Rachel had always been the quiet one at family gatherings, constantly overshadowed by Chloe's dramatic stories and Mom's endless praise for her. When she answered, her voice was cautious. "Isabel? Everything okay?" "More than okay," I said, pacing the kitchen. "I need your help with something." Oh, she said with a small laugh. "That sounds serious." "Not serious," I said, smiling. "Just overdue. I'm thinking of hosting a Halloween ball at the castle. Not the fancy kind of charity event. For foster kids. With games, music, food. I want to call it the Hilltop Halloween Ball, a night where everyone has a seat." There was a pause. I could almost hear her heart catching up to the words. "You're not joking," she finally said. "No," I replied. "I'm done waiting for an invitation to a table that was never meant for me. So I'm building a new one. One made sentence." She exhaled sharply, then laughed the kind of laugh that comes from relief. "You know what? After all these years of Chloe's spotlight, maybe it's about damn time someone did something different." I grinned. "That's what I thought." "I'm in," she said. "I'll bring the decorations and maybe some friends from the foundation I volunteer with. You just tell me the date." "Saturday night," I said. "The night before Halloween." "Perfect," she said. "It's about time the right person hosted the party everyone remembers." After the call, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, the idea now fully alive in my chest. The castle wasn't just a home anymore, it was about to become something larger. That evening, I made 2 more calls, one to Eli, my old college friend now living in Seattle, and one to Grandma, who still lived in Salem. Eli answered first. "Isabel Hart," he said, his voice teasing. "What mischief are you planning this time?" "Nothing too scandalous," I said. "Just a Halloween ball for charity." Think you can make it down from Seattle? He laughed. For you? I'll bring my saxophone and a car full of pumpkins. Then Grandma picked up. Her voice was slower now, older, but still strong. Izzy, she said. You sound different, peaceful. I smiled. Maybe because I finally am. Grandma, I'm hosting something here. For kids who don't have a place to belong. I want you to come. Instead, I was C-way a graded X in body. There was silence on the other end, then the sound of her soft laugh. You always were the one with the biggest heart, child. Your mother will faint when she finds out. Good, I said, half joking. Maybe she'll learn something from it. Before bed, I wrote the event name on a notepad in my study, the Hilltop Halloween Ball, a night where everyone has a seat. I underlined the last part twice. Because that was the point, everyone. Not just the golden children. Not just the ones with perfect parents or perfect costumes. Everyone who had ever been made to feel small, forgotten, uninvited, they would have a place here. Later, as Noah drifted off to sleep, I tucked the blanket around him. He looked up drowsily and whispered, Mom, can I still wear my Iron Man suit? I smiled and kissed his forehead. Of course, sweetheart. You can wear whatever you want. This time, you don't have to ask for candy. Because we're giving it? He mumbled. Yes, I whispered. Because we're giving it, and something even sweeter. When he fell asleep, I walked back to my study and turned on the lamp. The castle was silent, except for the sound of the wind brushing past the windows. I looked at the paper again, the words glowing softly under the light. A night where everyone has a seat. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a party, it was a message. I wasn't answering my mother's exclusion with silence. I was answering it with light, laughter, and a ballroom full of open doors. That night, as I turned off the lamp, I smiled to myself and thought, let them have their simple Halloween. Mine would be unforgettable. The days leading up to Halloween passed like a dream, long, golden afternoons fading into crisp, amber evenings. The vineyards below the castle had turned the color of rust and wine, and every night the fog rolled in, softening the edges of the world. The castle felt alive now, humming with movement and purpose. Noah was the first to wake every morning, already in his Iron Man suit before breakfast, running through the halls with a hammer and a roll of tape. Mom, can we hang the pumpkin lights all the way up to the tower? He asked, dragging a string of glowing lanterns across the floor. I smiled, sipping my coffee as I looked over the checklist pinned to the wall. Only if you promise not to fall off the ladder this time. He grinned. Deal. Together, we transformed the stone corridors into a river of orange light. Noah hung the paper bats, I polished the silver candlesticks, and we painted a small wooden sign together that read, Welcome home. He wanted to draw a pumpkin on it. I let him. When he finished, he turned to me, his face streaked with orange paint. Who's it for, Mom? The sign? For everyone who never had one, I said quietly. Everyone who was told they didn't belong. And didn't Riso? He nodded solemnly, not entirely understanding, but sensing the weight of it. By the next afternoon, the event team began to arrive. Chef Margaret was the first, short, red-haired, with sleeves rolled up and a permanent expression of mild exasperation. You're really doing this in a castle, she said as she unloaded her crates of ingredients. Yes, I said, smiling. And I'm counting on you to make it taste like magic. She gave me a mock salute. Then we'll start with pumpkin bisque and venison sliders, just like we planned. And for dessert, caramel apple tarts. People will think they've died and gone to autumn heaven. The scent of cinnamon and roasted squash soon filled the great hall. The kitchen, once silent, came alive with the rhythm of knives, laughter, and the hiss of cider simmering on the stove. In the ballroom, the decorators worked under the high-vaulted ceiling, setting up hundreds of glowing pumpkin lanterns, each one hand-carved with different designs, stars, vines, tiny hearts, even one shaped like a smiling robot, Noah's contribution. The floors gleamed with fresh polish, the oak shimmering under the light. Along the center of the ballroom stretched a single, impossibly long wooden table. There were no separate tables for adults and children. No kids' corner. Just one table wide, open, lined with vases of orange chrysanthemums and clusters of flickering candles. When the event coordinator asked if I wanted to separate the seating for comfort, I shook my head. No separations, I said firmly. Everyone sits together. Everyone gets the same view of the room, the same plate, the same glass. No one sits alone. On each plate, we placed a small silver seat badge engraved with the words, "You have a seat." I had them made by a jeweler in Salem, and when the box first arrived, I held one in my palm for a long time, running my thumb over the engraving. It wasn't just decoration, it was declaration. By evening, the string quartet had arrived, 4 musicians from Portland who rehearsed beneath the vaulted ceiling, their instruments tuning to the echo of stone. When they played Danse Macabre for the first time, the music rippled through the hall like a heartbeat. I stood at the doorway and listened, eyes closed, letting the notes sweep through me. It was eerie and beautiful, perfectly balanced between celebration and melancholy. "Maybe we'll mix in some soft jazz after that," the violinist suggested, "something to make people dance." "Perfect," I said. "Halloween should make people feel alive, not scared." Outside, floodlights illuminated the path from the gate to the entrance. A fog machine filled the air with mist, and hundreds of chrysanthemums lined the walkway, their orange petals glowing under lantern light. It wasn't the sharp, spooky kind of Halloween Chloe loved to post about online. It was warm, almost sacred, like a homecoming. That night, when the last of the workers left and silence settled over the castle, I walked through the ballroom one more time. The lights were dimmed, but the pumpkin lanterns still flickered faintly, casting shadows that danced across the floor. The long tables stretched endlessly before me, 12 dozen chairs waiting, each one set perfectly, each silver badge catching the faintest shimmer of light. I ran my hand along the back of one chair and whispered to the empty room. Every light, every chair, each one means something. Later, in my study, I opened my journal. The pages were already filled with sketches and notes, names of guests, delivery lists, and donation plans. But tonight, I wanted to write something different. Something truer. Every pumpkin light is a memory being healed. Every chair is an apology they never said. Every smile tomorrow will be proof that I made it through without closing my heart. I set the pen down, looked out the window, and saw the moon rising over the valley. The wind carried the faint smell of cider and smoke through the cracks in the window frame. Somewhere down the hall, Noah's laughter echoed faintly. He was still awake, probably sneaking another caramel tart. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was preparing for a battle or running from a wound. I was preparing for something beautiful. Tomorrow night, the castle would glow like a lantern on a hill, and for once, it wouldn't be to show the world what I had built. It would be to show the ones who had been left behind that there was still a place for them to come home. The night of the Halloween ball arrived with a whisper of rain and a sky streaked in silver fog. From the balcony, I could see headlights winding up the hill, SUVs climbing slowly through the mist, their beams cutting across the vineyards like ribbons of light. The castle glowed above it all, lanterns burning bright orange against the basalt walls, every window flickering like a heart finally beating at full rhythm. Inside, the quartet played softly beneath the vaulted ceiling, Danse Macabre melting into the warm sway of soft jazz. The smell of pumpkin bisque and caramel apples drifted through the ballroom, blending with the sound of laughter, clinking glasses, and children's footsteps echoing on the oak floors. Noah stood proudly beside me at the entrance, dressed in his shiny astronaut costume. His silver helmet was slightly crooked, and the glow from the lanterns made him look like he'd stepped straight out of the moon. The moment the first guests walked through the door, his eyes lit up. Grandma arrived first, wearing her favorite wool shawl and holding a small bouquet of marigolds. Noah ran to her, his mask wobbling as he shouted, "Grandma, Mom said tonight, everyone gets their own candy." "What is how comin'?" She bent down, laughing, her eyes glistening. "Did she now?" she said, hugging him tightly. "Then I think tonight's already perfect." Rachel came next, her hair damp from the drizzle, carrying 2 trays of cupcakes shaped like tiny pumpkins. When she stepped inside, she froze for a second, looking around the ballroom, the lights, the music, the table that stretched the length of the room with no divisions, no hierarchy. "Isabel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't even remember the last time a Halloween didn't revolve around Chloe's photo shoots or some costume contest. This." She glanced around again. "This feels real." I smiled, handing her a towel for her hair. "It is. And it's ours." More guests arrived, neighbors from Beaverton, old colleagues from Stanford, volunteers from the Foster Oregon Foundation. The castle filled with color and sound, a living, breathing warmth that wrapped around every corner. Kids in costumes darted between adults who weren't scolding them for running. No one was separated. The long table gleamed with cider glasses and silver seat badges, each one catching the light as people laughed and found their place. When it was time to speak, the event coordinator gestured for me to take the stage. But I didn't want speeches. Not tonight. I stepped up onto the small dais near the center of the ballroom and waited for the chatter to fade. The string quartet fell silent. Dozens of faces turned toward me, some familiar, many not, but all open, all waiting. "Thank you," I said simply, my voice carrying easily through the stone hall. "Thank you for showing up." That was it. No grand speech, no self-congratulation, no backstory, just gratitude. Because sometimes, showing up is the whole story. The crowd broke into applause, warm, honest, like a wave of shared relief. The music returned, livelier this time, and I stepped down into the mingling sea of laughter and motion. Chef Margaret appeared from the kitchen, apron dusted with flour. "It's working," she whispered, grinning as she handed me a tart. "You did it." "No," I said, looking around at the room. "We did." The evening unfolded like a story that had been waiting decades to be told. Children danced in the middle of the floor while adults joined them. No one was shushed or corrected. The air smelled like sugar and cider, and the windows steamed from the heat of so many bodies sharing one space. In a corner, the silent auction began, baskets of local wines, art pieces, and handmade quilts. Volunteers whispered excitedly as the bids climbed higher and higher. When it was over, the coordinator announced that the event had raised $260,000 for the Foster Oregon Foundation. The room erupted in applause. I caught Rachel's eyes across the table. She was crying softly. Grandma found me as the night began to wind down. She'd been sitting near the fireplace, a cup of cider in her hands, her silver hair glowing orange under the lantern light. She reached out and took my hand, her skin warm and soft. "You know," she said quietly, "your mother always said you were too serious, too independent." But I think what she never understood is that independence isn't cold, it's generous. I blinked back tears. "I just wanted to make something different," I said. "Something where no one had to knock." She squeezed my hand. "And you did. You built a door wide enough for the world to walk through." Her voice wavered as she looked around the room, the laughter, the dancing, Noah twirling near the stage with a little girl dressed as a fairy. "You've done something your mother should have done a long time ago," she whispered. "You opened the door for everyone. This frains of one no. It is fains that wide of harden." The music swelled, and for a moment, I just stood there, watching. Watching the glow of pumpkin lanterns dance against the stone walls, the silver badges catching the light, the sound of joy echoing through a place that once echoed only silence. I realized then that this wasn't just a party, it was a reclamation, a rewriting of every October I'd spent outside looking in. Noah ran over to me, his helmet pushed up onto his head, cheeks flushed from running. "Mom," he said breathlessly. "Everyone's happy, even Grandma danced." I knelt and hugged him tight. "I know, sweetheart. That's what happens when you let everyone have a seat." Outside, the rain had stopped. The fog had lifted from the valley, revealing a moon so bright it turned the vineyards silver. The castle glowed softly against the hillside, alive in a way it had never been before. For the first time, I wasn't standing outside someone else's door. I was standing in the doorway of my own, wide open, light spilling out into the night. The morning after the ball, sunlight spilled through the arched windows, soft and golden, glinting off the empty cider glasses still scattered across the long table. The castle smelled faintly of cinnamon and smoke, traces of laughter lingering in the air like a song that hadn't quite ended. Noah was in the kitchen eating leftover caramel tart when my phone began to buzz nonstop. Notifications stacked on the screen, news alerts, tags, and texts. One headline stood out in bold letters. Oregon tech entrepreneur hosts charity Halloween ball at her hilltop castle, raises $260,000 for foster kids. The article was everywhere: the local news, online blogs, even the regional morning segment on TV. They'd used one of the press photos taken the night before me and Noah standing under the pumpkin lanterns, both smiling, both a little surprised at how happy we looked. The caption read, "A mother and son turn pain into light." I didn't realize my hands were shaking until Noah tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, that's you," he said with a grin. "You're on TV." I laughed softly. "Guess so." He tilted his head. "Does that mean Grandma will see it too?" I hesitated for a moment, looking out at the morning fog lifting from the hills. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "I think everyone will." And I was right. By noon, the family group chat, the one I had muted months ago, lit up for the first time in weeks. Messages rolled in one after another. Aunt Lisa sent a link to the article with a string of heart emojis. Uncle Ray replied with, "Didn't know Isabel was running the whole state now. Impressive." Then came Chloe's message. Just one single emoji. I stared at it for a moment and smiled. It was so Chloe, speechless, but not for lack of words. For once, there was nothing she could spin, nothing to compete with. Not 10 minutes later, my phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. Grandma was sitting by the fireplace, sipping her tea. "You going to answer that, Izzy?" she asked gently. I nodded, pressing speaker. "Good morning, Mom." Her voice came sharp, tight, the same tone she used when I was a teenager. "Isabel, what on earth have you done?" I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "That news story," she snapped. "Everyone's calling me, asking why you said I excluded you. You're making it sound like we left you out. You're making the whole family look heartless." I closed my eyes, breathing slowly. "I didn't say anything about you, Mom. I just hosted an event." "You made people think it," she pressed on. "People are asking why you didn't spend Halloween with family. You've embarrassed us. You've made it look like we abandoned you." Her words stung, but not for the reasons she thought. Because in her mind, perception mattered more than reality. The truth had always been negotiable, as long as the story looked good from the outside. I looked at Grandma. She was watching quietly, eyes steady, understanding. Noah sat cross-legged beside her on the rug, his helmet from last night still beside him. "Mom," I said, keeping my tone calm, "you told me, just your sister's kids this year. I didn't exclude myself, you did. I just chose to do something different instead. Thanks for watching." There was silence on the line, then a sharp exhale. "You're twisting things again," she said, always playing the victim. I shook my head. "No, Mom, I'm not playing anything. I'm teaching Noah something you never taught me, that love doesn't have to be rationed like candy." Grandma reached over and squeezed my hand. "Put it on speaker, dear," she whispered. I tapped the button. "You're on speaker, Mom." Grandma leaned closer to the phone, her voice soft but firm. "Judy," she said, using my mother's name in that deliberate, gentle way that made her words sound heavier. "You always thought fairness meant giving everyone the same slice of pie. But it isn't. Fairness is giving everyone the same love. Isabel learned that before any of us." "Mom," my mother said sharply, "please, don't." But Grandma continued. "No, Judy. You need to hear this. You spent years closing doors in the name of keeping order. Isabel just opened one for everyone, even for you. And you can't stand it, can you?" The silence that followed was long and raw. I could hear my mother breathing on the other end, a brittle, kind of quiet. Finally, she spoke, her voice smaller. "I never meant to hurt you, Isabel." "I know," I said softly. "But you did. And the thing is, I'm not angry anymore. I just stopped waiting to be invited." There was no reply. Just the faint, uneven sound of her breath and then, a quiet click as the line went dead. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The fire crackled. Outside, the rain began again, tapping lightly against the window panes. Noah broke the silence first. "Mom," he whispered, "is Grandma Judy mad?" I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and smiled faintly. "Maybe," I said. "But sometimes silence is the answer." He frowned, thinking hard. "Like when you don't say anything, but you already said everything?" I laughed softly. "Exactly like that." Grandma reached for her cup again, her eyes glistening. "You handled that better than I ever could," she murmured. I looked toward the window, where the clouds were beginning to break apart, streaks of pale blue peeking through. The castle stood tall, its lanterns still faintly glowing from the night before, a little dimmer now, but still warm. And as I sat there with Grandma and Noah beside me, I realized something. I didn't need her apology to heal. I'd already built my own peace, one that didn't depend on being understood. Sometimes, silence isn't absence. It's acknowledgement. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. By the next morning, the storm had passed literally and otherwise. The rain outside had quieted to a steady drizzle, and the air over the vineyards shimmered with the kind of pale light that only comes after a long, cleansing night. The castle, which just days ago had stood cold and quiet, now felt lived in, like the walls themselves were still holding the echo of laughter. When I finally turned my phone back on, it was flooded again, but this time, not with tension or judgment. The family group chat that had once been silent for months was now alive with messages, photos, and emojis. Rachel had sent a wide shot of the ballroom, every lantern still glowing, captioned, "Still can't believe this really happened. Isabel, you turned Halloween into something sacred." Eli had uploaded a video clip from the night before, him and a group of kids Noah front and center singing Monster Mash with plastic microphones and paper guitars. The caption read, "If heaven has a Halloween party, it probably looks like this." The video had already been shared across everyone's feeds, and even old family friends were commenting, "This looks incredible. Next year, same place?" I scrolled through the messages, smiling at the flood of warmth. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years were chiming in, college friends, old colleagues, neighbors from my childhood street. Everyone seemed to feel it. Something about the ball had hit a chord that went deeper than costumes and charity. It was the kind of night people didn't just attend, they remembered. Around noon, Rachel called. "You made the papers again," she said, laughing. "What this time?" "Front page of the Portland Chronicle." I could hear her flipping through the pages. "A mother and son turn pain into light. They quoted you, but it's Noah that's going viral." I blinked. "Noah?" "Yep. They interviewed him for the segment." "You didn't see it?" I shook my head. "I was trying not to look at anything this morning." She chuckled. "Well, get ready to cry, because your kid might have just outshined all of us." I opened the link she texted me, and there it was, the video from last night's news broadcast. The reporters stood in front of the castle gates, still decorated with flowers and pumpkin lanterns. The banner from the event, "A Night Where Everyone Has a Seat," fluttered softly behind her. Then the camera cut to a clip of Noah, still in his astronaut helmet, holding his bag of leftover candy. The reporter crouched down and asked, "So Noah, what did your mom teach you about tonight?" He looked straight into the camera, smiling shyly. "She said, if someone ever feels left out, you should invite them to your house. Because maybe they just need a seat." The room went quiet. Even through a screen, the sincerity in his voice was disarming. No forced smile, no pretense, just truth, distilled into the simplest words. Rachel was right, I cried. By afternoon, the clip had spread across social media. Thousands of shares. Comments pouring in. "This little boy understands kindness better than most adults. Someone give that mom an award. This restored my faith in people." Way too in Duster. It was surreal watching something that had started as a quiet act of defiance turn into a message of healing. I hadn't planned it for attention. I just wanted to rewrite an old wound. But somehow, it had become something bigger, a small ripple of light moving through the noise of the world. Grandma called later that evening. "Your boy's famous," she said, laughing softly. "Everyone at my church keeps asking when they can meet him." In Stidning, I smiled, leaning against the window, watching Noah chase bubbles across the courtyard below. "He's not famous," I said. "He's just honest." "Maybe that's the same thing these days," she replied. That night, we sat by the fireplace again, Noah curled up beside me under a blanket, half asleep, the TV still replaying clips from the event. I scrolled through my messages one last time before bed. The words blurred together. "Proud of you. Beautiful work. Thank you for reminding us what family really means." For years, I had wanted my family's approval. Now, I realized I didn't need it. I had built something more lasting than approval connection. And not just with them, but with strangers who saw themselves in my story. I turned off the screen and looked down at Noah, his face soft in the firelight. He was breathing slowly, his hand resting over my arm. The same child who had once asked, "Where will we go for candy?" had become the voice of something larger than both of us. I pressed a kiss to his hair and whispered, "You did good, sweetheart." Outside, the fog drifted through the valley again, gentle and slow, wrapping the vineyards in silver. For the first time in my life, Halloween didn't feel like a season of masks and pretending. It felt like a promise that no matter how cold the world could get, someone, somewhere, would keep a light on for those still finding their way home. A week later, the castle was quiet again. The lanterns had been taken down, the last of the decorations packed away, and the air around Dundee Hills had turned cold and clear. I was sitting by the kitchen window, sipping tea, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Mom. "Can we come for dinner?" "Just us." "Mom. What's expected?" I stared at it for a long time. There were no apologies, no explanations, just those few words. And yet, they carried something I hadn't seen from her in years: humility. I typed back only 2 words, "Of course." That Saturday evening, the house smelled of rosemary and baked bread. There were no costumes, no candles, no guests this time, just a simple meal in the warm stone kitchen. The fire crackled softly in the hearth as I set the table for 5, Mom, Dad, Chloe, Grandma, Noah, and me. When the doorbell rang, Noah rushed to open it. "Grandma Judy, Grandpa, Aunt Chloe," he shouted, his voice bright with genuine excitement. They stepped inside slowly, like travelers unsure if they were welcome. Mom carried a pie. Dad looked around the kitchen, the old discomfort in his shoulders replaced by something closer to awe. Chloe hung back, her eyes drifting across the walls as if searching for traces of the girl she'd once overshadowed. Dinner was quiet at first. Just the sound of forks against plates, the occasional comment about the food, and Noah's little bursts of chatter. He talked about the ball, about the kids he met, about the candy he still had hidden in the pantry. Slowly, the silence began to thaw. Dad cleared his throat. "You've done well, Isabel," he said softly. I don't think I ever saw everything." "Not really." Mom set down her fork and looked at me. Her voice was low, fragile. "We thought we were keeping things fair," she said. "That by holding on to the same traditions, we were doing the right thing. But I see now that what we called tradition was really just confinement." Her words hung in the air, trembling a little. It wasn't a full apology, but it was something an opening. Chloe had been quiet the whole time, tracing the rim of her glass. Finally, she looked up, her eyes soft. "Your son," she said quietly, glancing at Noah. "He's brave and kind. You did a good job with him, Isabel." Unlisted our pawns. Noah, who had been busy rearranging his mashed potatoes into a rocket ship, looked up and smiled. "Thanks, Aunt Chloe. Next year, I want to give candy to you, too." Everyone chuckled softly, awkwardly, but real. He turned to me then, eyes bright. "Mom, can we give candy to them next year?" I reached over and brushed his hair from his face. "We can, sweetheart," I said, smiling. "But remember, only invite the ones who truly want to knock." Thanks for Mormons into having tent serpents, and it's so margoted informations. He nodded solemnly, as if I'd just told him a secret rule of the universe. When dinner ended, we didn't rush to say goodbye. Dad helped clear the table. Chloe washed dishes beside me, humming an old tune from our childhood. And for a brief moment, it felt like the kind of evening I used to dream about, the one where everyone stayed, not out of obligation, but out of warmth. Later, after they left, I sat by the window again. The moonlight spread across the vineyards like silver paint, the hills glowing faintly in the distance. I opened my journal and began to write, the pen gliding easily across the page. I was once the child standing outside the door. Tonight, my son was the one holding it open for others. You don't need anyone to give you a seat. You can build your own table and invite those who know how to cherish it. I looked out across the hilltop, where the last traces of fog moved like whispers over the vines. Somewhere out there, the world was still full of people trying to find their way home. And maybe that was what forgiveness really was, not a single act, but a quiet light you keep burning for those who finally decide to return. As I closed the journal, I whispered softly into the silence, almost as if speaking to the girl I once was. If they don't invite you into their house, build one of your own where the lights never go out. Because sometimes, the most beautiful kind of revenge is giving, but only to the right people.